Senator Biden and I think, have both acknowledged that for those of you who aren't aware, there was a genocide that did take place against the Armenian people. It is one of the...
Armenia is a small Christian nation. It is bordered by Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Iran. Russia and Europe have also been influential on its development. As a Christian nation surrounded by Muslim neighbors, Armenian prosperity and religion have attracted much resentment and persecution during the turmoil of the Ottoman Empire. In 1828, after Russia's expansion-fueled war with Persia, the lands of Armenia lay divided between the Ottoman and Russian empires. Under Russian rule, capitalism, enlightenment, and romantic thought flourished, helping build the platform on which the Russophile and European outlooks would later grow among Armenians. Meanwhile, Western Armenia remained under Ottoman rule. Like their Russian cousins, Ottoman Armenians found economic prosperity. Yet, along with the other Christians of the empire, Armenians remained second-class citizens.
If you're a Christian or a Jew, they allow you to live. They don't kill you. But you have to accept the fact that you are not equal. You're second class.
But the Ottoman Empire had been declining since 1827. In an effort to avoid collapse, the government began a series of reforms in 1839. The so-called Tanzimat era promised tolerance and legal equality among the entire people. Great strides in reformation were accomplished, bringing much hope to the Armenians and other minorities of the empire. But when Abdul Hamid II became Sultan in 1876, he reversed the Tanzimat reformist policies. Rather than embracing diversity, he gave fuel to the revolutionary thought of pan-Islamism, a union of all Muslim nations. Viewing the Tanzimat policies as incapable of integrating the desperate people of the empire, he instead turned to religion. Christians within the empire were suddenly no longer perceived as a supportive element, but instead as an impediment to prosperity. Abdul Hamid's feared dissolution seemed a reality when the Russo-Ottoman War broke out. Armenian forces and leaders, hoping to reunite eastern and western Armenia, assisted the Russians to victory. The angered Ottoman government reacted by encouraging the persecution of all Ottoman Armenians, including those who had remained loyal. It thus established a suspicion of Armenians that would reciprocate later with horrific consequences. The Treaty of San Stefano and Treaty of Berlin ending the war not only granted Russia its long-sought access to the Mediterranean Sea, but also guaranteed Russian protection of the rights of Ottoman Armenians. The war thus prompted most Armenians to look towards Russia for their security. Meanwhile, cultivated among the urban middle classes, nationalist movements were steadily growing among the minorities of the Ottoman Empire. In their efforts to reach greater autonomy, Armenian nationalists sought European assistance. Though they gained Russian and British sympathy, their requests were largely ignored. Nonetheless, as Armenians continued to foster European sentiment, the conservative Ottoman regime increasingly viewed them as subversive. The continued weakening of the Ottoman Empire only magnified its fear and suppression of the new nationalist movements. Hostilities soon erupted into mass violence. Sultan Abdul Hamid II attempted to restore territorial integrity. To that end, he authorized what would become known as the Hamidian massacres, an outright slaughter of Ottoman Christians. In 1896, as a result of lightened foreign relations with Germany, Russia, and Britain, the Ottoman Empire halted the massacres, but only after 100 to 300,000 Armenians had lost their lives. The continued decline in the Ottoman Empire's economic and territorial power nurtured discontent among the population. In 1908, reformist Ottoman army officers retaliated against the Sultan's autocratic regime via the Young Turk Revolution. Embracing non-Muslims and Muslims alike, they restored parliament, reformed and centralized the administration, promoted industrialization, and encouraged education. As during the Tanzimat reforms, the Armenians and Christians of the empire rejoiced in promises of liberal treatment.
The Young Turk came to power on a platform of equality, liberty, equality, and justice. They were supposed to be European educated. They were supposed to be liberals. They were supposed to bring about reform and change to the Turkish Empire in a way that gave the Armenians hope.
But conservative Ottomans did not respond well. A short-lived counter-coup led by Islamic theologians and Abdul Hamid loyalists took power in April 1909. Blaming Armenians for the re-establishment of the constitution and envious of Armenian prosperity in the Adana province, they mandated the killing of the Armenians of Adana. By the time the Young Turks regained control in July, 15,000 to 30,000 Armenians had perished. But the Balkan Wars reversed even the Young Turks' radiant promises of toleration. The wars led to hundreds of thousands of Muslims migrating to Anatolia. These refugees outwardly showed both resentment of the prosperous Armenians and a desire to avenge their fallen comrades. In face of the rising anti-Christian mentality and the significant decrease in the Christian population caused by the loss of the Balkans, the Young Turk government resolved that only Turkism could solve the empire's troubles.
The concept of Turkism was made up of many different nationalities, many different religions, and now the Young Turks said, no, this didn't work, this is the source of our weakness, so what we're going to do now is create a new country, a modern country, based on one people, one religion, one culture, and who doesn't fit into that new definition of what a Turk is, there's no room for them in our country, so we're going to get rid of them.
When World War I erupted, the Ottomans asked Armenians to incite rebellion in Russian Armenia, promising autonomy in return. Russia likewise promised autonomy if the Armenians instead aided their effort. Armenians were reluctant to trust the Ottoman government, which had repeatedly gone back on promises of reform. Instead, they laid their hopes on Russia's allies, France and Great Britain. Although the majority of Armenians within the empire remained loyal, Ottomans increasingly saw them as treacherous. In 1915, under the instructions of the Ottoman Minister of Interior, all Armenian troops within the Ottoman army were demobilized and transferred to labor battalions. As the war progressed, so did the Allied forces. The increasingly nationalist Young Turk government used proclaimed fear of internal rebellion as an excuse to execute its long-architected pan-Islamic dream. It initiated the wholesale persecution of Armenians.
World War I was the cover that allowed the Turkish nationalists to take the extreme measure of destroying all the Armenians. If there was no World War I in 1914, 15, 16, maybe there would not have been an Armenian genocide.
On Red Sunday, the prominent Armenians of Constantinople were arrested and executed. Soon after, Armenian intellectuals and leaders throughout the empire were deported or killed. Armenians were then required to surrender their weapons on pretext of helping the war effort. Next, young male Armenians were drafted and either executed or worked to death. The notorious death marches which followed removed the remaining women, children, and elderly. The few who survived were sentenced to the Syrian desert. For most of the war, Russia occupied much of Ottoman Armenia, thus helping protect Armenians from the Ottoman armies. But after the Bolshevik Revolution, Russian forces withdrew from the Caucasians. In order to help defend themselves, Armenia and its neighbors, Georgia and Azerbaijan, formed the Transcaucasian Federation. But the union soon failed, and the Democratic Republic of Armenia was established. In the Treaty of Sevres ending World War I, Armenia was recognized as independent, and American President Woodrow Wilson was responsible for drawing its borders. The Treaty of Lausanne, replacing Sevres, retracted much of the territorial concessions to Armenia given by the Treaty of Sevres. But the Turkish revolutionaries, which had taken control over the newly formed Republic of Turkey, remained fearful of future land concessions, and were angry at the partitioning of the Ottoman Empire. They therefore resolved to destroy the now independent Armenian Republic. In the Turkish-Armenian War of 1920, the Republic of Turkey, with Soviet arms and financial aid, devastated Armenia. Armenia surrendered in November 1920 with the Treaty of Alexandropol. Armenia yielded half of its pre-war territory and all claims to territories given by the Treaty of Sevres. The Bolshevik 11th Red Army invaded Armenia even as the peace settlements with Turkey were being established. After 6 years of devastation and war, Armenians were able to resist for only 1 week. By December, Soviet Armenia was established.